Good morning, everyone. We are so delighted that you're here this morning. We thought it would just be fun to talk about something art related that's been in the news that is certainly inspiring a lot of discussion, both pro and con on the art front. And so I am so delighted today to be joined by two of my favorite artists, Kim Harrell and Natasha Ruschka. Welcome to our discussion about the banana in the room. We're going to go ahead and give you brief introductions of ourselves so you kind of know where we're coming from as we talk about this particular piece of art. So, Kim, would you like to start?
Sure. My name's Kim Harrell, and I'm in Aurora, Colorado. I am a silversmith, goldsmith, and jewelry designer, and I've been making my living doing this for 30 years or more. And I studied in London. I'm originally from Denver, but I live and work in Aurora now after living in London for 14 years, which is where I studied and started my business. And I make contemporary silver and gold jewelry, art inspired. And in general, I love art, and I lived in the wonderful city of London for 14 years. And so I was living there during the age of Damien Hirst and Tracy Emin coming up, the British, what were they called? I can't remember what they were called. But so yeah, I have thoughts.
I figured you probably would have thought so. And then, Natasha, tell us about you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Natasha Ruschka. I'm an Australian artist. I did live in Colorado for a while in 2015 to 2019, which is where I met Jennifer, and we had a bit of fun at the origins of the Park Hill Art Association. I'm an oil painter. I've been painting for about 7 years now. Um, I paint still life and landscapes. I love to be outdoors painting the landscape as much as I can. And yeah, if you're from Australia and you're watching this, well done, because it's early here now. So I take my hat off to you.
So, what time is it there for you, Natasha?
Just ticked over 3 a.m.
Thank you for joining us so early. My brain isn't working at 3 a.m., so who would know what I'd say at that time? So,
You'll forgive me if I pause a little bit and I'm not quite there. I'll do my best.
I'm I'm with you. I've only had one cup of coffee, so
okay. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Steck. I've kind of created all my life. It's been my therapy. But I became a working artist about 7 years ago after I retired from my previous career. And it's been truly amazing. And so I do really whimsical, colorful art. So you won't find anything realistic in the pieces that I do. And they're primarily focused on animals and dogs and cats in particular. The other thing I bring to the table is I'm actually the CEO, if you will, of Artburst Studios. So Artburst is, well, it'll be 3 years old in
Wow.
February, and we've been
yeah.
doing online shows now for 2 years. And so, as Artburst, we really pride ourselves in bringing amazing artists to you in online art shows. And so it kind of adds just a little bit of a different perspective. So I'm in Denver as well, and that's how I met both Natasha and Kim. So that's me, and that's what perspective I come from. Let me give you just a little bit of background, and you guys can hop in here anywhere to add additional information. So, here's a brief overview of the story behind The Comedian. Now, all of you probably know already that The Comedian is the piece of art that's a banana duct taped to the wall. So it was created by artist Maurizio Cattelan. Of course, I probably am not pronouncing that right. In 2019, the artist and a French gallery, Perotin, displayed Comedian with a six-figure price at the Art Basel Miami Beach Fair. Now, this fair is made up of art galleries around the world who bring and feature some of their artists in this particular event. So people lined up to see it, and you can imagine that the story went viral from there. So in 2019, there were 3 editions sold. Now, the collectors don't receive the actual banana. And as a matter of fact, it got eaten a few times by some visitors to the show. But what they get, and they paid 120,000 plus each for these 3 editions. They receive a certificate and instructions on how to recreate and hang the work wherever they're going to display it. In 2021, Maurizio described comedian as not a joke, but called it a reflection of what we value. So one of those limited edition pieces, or certificates, if you will, was listed at Sotheby's, and it was listed and sold in the last few weeks for $6.2 million to Justin Sun, who's a Chinese entrepreneur who owns a crypto platform. So I went ahead and I invited Justin to join us on LinkedIn, and he never responded. Now, I'm not sure why, because who wouldn't want to join the 3 of us in a conversation about this artwork?
We're not important enough, Jennifer.
So who knows? Maybe he'll see it at some point. But anyway, so let's go ahead and we'll get the discussion started now that we have a little bit of the backstory. So, Kim, when you first heard about this story, what did you think?
Well, I remember when it was at the Miami show and all the controversy around it, and I just rolled my eyes as usual. But I have to say, yeah, I hated it. I thought it was some bullshit. And but yeah, that was my first thought. That is some bullshit. And really, that money could be used in so many more better ways. But I will hold my thought on that. That was my first impression, and that's all you asked for at this point. So that's what I will tell you.
It is, and we're looking forward to hearing the rest. So, Natasha, why do you think the original buyers and then Justin Sun purchased this piece of conceptual art?
Well, at first I was going to say maybe they wanted a snack. I don't know. I don't know. I think ever since I've been an artist, I've tried to understand or thought I knew why people bought what they bought. Even when I do a show, quite often the first piece that I sell is never what I think or sometimes even what I like the best. So art is different to everybody, but when people buy art, it's because it's emotional. It speaks to them. They see it and they go, "Oh my gosh, I must have that." But that's not the case here, and it was really perplexing to me. It's almost as if it's a concept. The fact that there's assembly involved is a little odd. So yeah, I think they were making a statement and almost participating in the art by purchasing it. Does that make sense?
It does. What kind of statement do you think they might have been making?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that piece of art was created to disrupt in a way, wasn't it? And so by purchasing it, they're kind of playing that part. So they're stepping up to go, well, I'm in. I'll play along.
I love that.
And I don't mind finding a banana and taping it to the wall every 4 days to keep my artwork, to keep the piece intact. That's high maintenance, if you ask me, for an artwork. Someone told me once that art is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. How do you think that applies to this piece?
I agree. I mean, I am I've been in business for a really long time, and I collect art. Like you said, Natasha, I mean, it's like, it's so personal, and what somebody will pay 120 grand for, somebody else would pay, $5 for. So it really is in the eye of the beholder. So yeah, I think a piece of art is worth as much as somebody's willing to pay for it. But I also think the whole art, especially the fine art world, in terms of that we're talking about, conceptual art, wall art, sculpture, kind of more traditional art, not necessarily jewelry or craft. It's not just about the object; it is about the message.
Mm.
And as a creative, to know that my thoughts and my ideas and my concepts are valued is really important, and that is the role of an artist, is to be a disruptor, and that's what we get paid for, and we are meant to provoke. Not every piece of art that people make is going to be provocative, but like there's a piece of art here in Denver that I really 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 hate, and I it's a piece of public art. I will not say what it is. So here's the bottom line: yes, art is worth whatever somebody's willing to pay for it. But I think anything that causes this kind of discussion is going to be good art. If good art elicits any kind of good art elicits every kind of emotion, from extreme love and joy to extreme hate and vitriol. So
Yeah.
that's what my conclusion has been.
So,
And it's kind of great to be paid for coming up with something that just kind of makes everybody think about what we're doing and what we value.
Do you think this helps or hurts the art world, paying $6 million for a banana taped to the wall?
well, I think I think it's good and bad. So I guess it just depends on the moment. As Kim said, what did you think when you first heard about it? I was shocked, and I guess in some ways, and it's kind of been in the discussion already. Is it about the actual piece of art, or is it about being audacious and the shock value of that art? I often wonder if it turns some people off against the art world. And the art world is such a big world that it seems so impersonal. But so many artists are our next door neighbors, and so many artists are in
Mm.
local art guilds, and so many artists are, they just have a show once a year where they feature a couple of pieces. They don't run in the circles and the channels of places where people spend millions of dollars on art. I was at a pottery show just a couple weeks ago and bought the most beautiful piece that was $60,
I know.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
think it as long as people understand that art comes at all levels,
Yeah.
most of us
Well,
couldn't afford $120,000 piece or a $6 million piece. Yeah,
so
yeah.
so Jennifer, what kind of message do you think this sends to artists, especially emerging artists?
I think for those of us who are in, we're all in. We're all in. And, maybe there's people who step away from that and go, you know what, I'm not going to do it anymore. I mean, it can be expensive to do it.
Mm.
It's very time consuming in many ways. I mean, maybe even this artist took, months to decide what this piece was going to be. But yeah, it just seems like you're putting so many hours in, and what are the actual chances that you would get that money back? I would tell emerging artists who are discouraged by this, keep going. This artist who sold their piece for $120,000, that's just one segment of art lovers around the world, and that only you can create what you create, and it won't exist if you don't create it. Your work matters. I interviewed Janine Pinnell. She's a sculpture artist, and I interviewed her, well, it was before COVID. And she said something that comes to mind for me a lot. I remind myself a lot. Now, her work is very different, and it has a sense of humor to it. And she told me she does festivals, and she said 100 people will walk by her tent, look in, and many of them will shake their heads and walk away. But generally, about 8 people come into her tent to take a look at what she has to offer, and she creates for those 8.
Yeah, it's That's the truth. One of the people watching said the emperor's new clothes, and I absolutely, that was my first reaction. Like the emperor has, it's like my new outfit, and he's strutting around naked, and everybody's like,
Yeah. Now, Janet, she'd like to know more about the artist. What prompts this kind of piece,
mm.
and what kind of art does this artist create?
Well, that gold toilet. So I believe the piece was called America, and it was like 2019, or maybe it was earlier than that. It was a 18 karat solid gold, 18 karat functioning toilet that was displayed in London, and it was stolen. And as a goldsmith, that's a lot of dough. I'm sure it's melted down now and it's been converted into cash. But it was called America, and I thought that piece was very poignant. And it's amazing to me when I think about artists like Claudio and living in London during that time of the British. I cannot remember what they were called. There was a name for this whole group: Damien Hirst, Tracy Emin, several other artists involved with that. It was provocative artwork. I remember Tracy Emin's bed, or her tent, that was called Everybody I Ever Slept With. And it's like, but it's so just like a title, and then you see something, it provokes thought. And that's really a powerful thing to do. I mean, you can do that with a painting too. You can think of Van Gogh's Starry Night and how he sees the world, the trees and the sky and the swirls, and how someone thought to compose that. I mean, it's just, young British artist. Thank you, Rebecca. Damien Hirst's cow and half cow and formaldehyde. I saw his shark in formaldehyde at the Serpentine Gallery in London, and you just shake your head. And his work, his paintings, he does those dot paintings. It's assembly. He sends you the instructions and how to paint the dot. And this reminds me of an artist, Joseph Beuys. My husband's a big fan of his. He was a German artist, and he believes everybody's an artist, and anything goes.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? I guess I believe that too. Everybody's an artist in their own right. Now, I want to bring another artist kind of into the discussion here, and that is Banksy. Do you
Mm,
do either one of you know the history of Banksy, to just give us a summary?
I don't. I
No.
just know he's been around. I think he's British. I think that's the consensus. We don't really know who he is, do we?
I
Hmm?
find interesting. Somebody knows who he is, and they're just not releasing it, I believe,
Mm.
to add to kind of the drama. I
The
think
history.
if I remember right, I was reading a little bit about Banksy, and he started clearly as a graffiti artist, which, looking back, graffiti was not accepted. Let's say that a lot of times the graffiti was maybe not up to par, maybe not the
Mm.
most exciting thing. And then people started noticing, but his work was also very audacious and in your face in a different way, that when we're talking about the comedian today. They auctioned that piece off at the auction house, where as soon as it sold, it shredded the piece. Um,
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Oh,
hard
yeah, I
to
remember that. Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
another very provocative um performance in a way, isn't it? It's almost like
Mm.
art turning into a performance. I think these uh types of art say a lot about the artist, don't they? Because as an artist myself, I know that you can only sort of authenticity is really important to an artist. It's really hard to do and create anything that isn't coming from within and that isn't really
Yeah.
um, aligned with what's you can't spend all this time doing something that doesn't work for you or that doesn't feel right or important. And so I think when I look at pieces like this, I say to myself, okay, well that's what aligns for them. That's what they think about. That it tells you what people create tells you a lot about the person. Even
Mm,
just if you look at the three of us, you know, you can get an insight into our personality, and
mm,
quite often artists are in influence, and they create based on what's happening around them, what's going on in their life.
yeah,
Uh,
very true.
so I guess for me, I was asking the questions: how does the banana relate back to this person, and what's going on for them, and what statements they feel they need to make, or what's happening in their life that they need to draw out or disrupt for everybody else.
So, Natasha, how did this work? What kind of impact did it have for you?
At first, I was thinking, wow, I'm really working too hard.
Amen.
I just need to be smarter. No,
Works. Yeah, don't work harder, work smarter.
I think it's impossible to not go straight to the monetary value, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
and look at how that defines the piece. Like if
Mm,
somebody paid $2, would we think about it differently? Um, and
mm.
would that be a different message? And so I don't know, when the artist did this, did he think it was going to first get over $100,000 the first time? So yeah, I guess at first I was a little bit, oh wow, okay. um, but then you realize, like Jennifer said earlier, there's different levels that you're playing on, and I make art that makes me happy, and looking at the beauty in the world and excitement. And I just see here an artist who has something to say, and it's not about, I guess, the visual impact. It's more about
Yeah.
how
It's the
can
concept. It's
how
the
can they
concept.
provoke a reaction.
Mm,
So
mm.
then I'm going, okay, now I'm turning around and I'm going, okay, so now what's my reaction? And is that what they were expecting? So you can start to go around the loop.
Remember, I said my first reaction was, this is some bullshit. So, provoked by being invited to participate in this and just thinking in general about these things that at first I'm like, ugh, are you kidding me? I have to say, and by reading some other comments some friends of mine have made, it's kind of brilliant. I mean, it's just kind of
Yeah.
effing brilliant that, we're taking, you got up at 3 a.m., I got up at whatever time to be here, and Jennifer has been promoting this. I mean, that's what he provoked.
Look what he did.
And it's actually a really positive thing. And I also really, really love the fact that I could grab a banana and duct tape. I do not have bananas right now because we ate them all. But we have lots of duct tape. I could recreate that art for nothing. So this millionaire guy who bought this piece at the auction in Sotheby's for 6.2 million kind of paid for all of us to make banana art of our own. But you're right, aesthetically it's crap, and I would never tape a banana to a wall except as a joke. And it kind of makes a mockery of the whole art world in a way, but it's kind of brilliant. It's just kind of brilliant. It's awfully brilliant. I mean, it's just kind of fabulous.
Well, I
Um,
don't know about you, but I could use an injection of about $6 million today to,
well, absolutely. I mean, this is where it becomes more, there's a more ethical issue. It's like, really, should that even be allowed? People spend that much money on art.
And that 100, and was it 120, the first one? I mean, that's
Mm,
not a lot of money to some people. It's hard to get your head
no,
around that. But if you're a cryptocurrency person, you could spend that much without thinking. 6 million, you probably have to think about a bit more. But I think when they paid 120 the first time, then obviously they thought, well, 6 million's probably the right ratio for moving up. I don't know. These are zeros that it's hard for us to get our head around. But there's
mm,
transactions that happen in this sort of stuff, not just art, but all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
so Janet asks, so who provoked the reactions, the artist or the collectors who paid the money?
oh, it's a collaborative effort. I mean, I think the artist is the initiator, but the joke continues. The provocation continues as it's sold and resold, and it comes up again. We won't see it again for another 10 years, and then it'll come up again, and no one will care.
That's pretty amazing. It's got a lifespan that will continue.
Yeah. I mean, and this will be written, in art history classes, they're talking about this. But there's a whole history of people, Duchamp with his urinal. I mean, Dada, it's Dadaism. I mean, the ready-made things that you have to hand and you can make art. And it's interesting to me that it is mostly men who do this kind of art. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's quite interesting. I mean, Tracy Emin is the only female artist I can think of. I mean, she doesn't do that kind of art really anymore. She's kind of changed what she does. She's kind of amazing. She's an amazing artist.
So Kim, as you have, you've worked in the gallery space before.
Mm,
If the person or people at, let me find it here on my notes, Perotin, which is the gallery who
mm.
carries the work by Maurizio, if
Oh,
they
Maurizio.
said, Jennifer, we want that piece, and they put me in someplace else, how much would that increase the value of my art? One person in the art world who has a following and a voice and a level of credibility
Mm,
and respect, if they took one of my pieces and they submitted it to this place in Miami, would that
mm.
make a difference as to the value and the future?
Maybe it's just kind of part of the Zeitgeist, if you will, because I know there are very famous people who collect art and have amazing art collections and have commissioned artists to do things. You think about Amy Sherrod, who did the Michelle Obama portrait. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
knew of her work before, but that commission made her. I mean, it's the whole, the 30-year overnight sensation. So I've been doing this for 30 years, and then somebody of significance comes along and buys something, and the press takes it up because it's a slow day, and the next thing you know, I'm inundated with orders.
Yeah.
It's kind of a double-edged sword, that.
It is. Well, and so Natasha, you started actively painting in it as a working artist. I think you said 7 or 8 years ago. How have you seen the value or what people are willing to pay for your artwork increase over that time period?
Yeah, it's interesting thinking on what you were just saying about the influence of galleries and how that can legitimize a piece, how something can go from, I guess, what you think it might be worth to then uh, what a gallery thinks it's worth and how they might elevate it. Yeah, it can be a slippery slope, but it's also very interesting to see how the public can be influenced and led by, I guess, not so much what they feel, but what others suggest they should think about something. Um, I definitely see, I don't say that I personally have experienced that sort of phenomenon, unfortunately. However, it is interesting to see how art can be changed and values can be changed. Sorry, I'm wrestling a cat here. I sound distracted. He broke into the room despite my best efforts. Sorry, I'm going to just keep him quiet. Yeah. No, back to your question. I think it's definitely interesting to see how the value of art can be changed based on the way it's promoted,
Mm,
where it's placed, what people might say about it. So yeah.
Yeah.
mm,
It makes you wonder, and then I think it goes back to, as Kim said, be careful what you wish for. You
mm,
Yes.
know, I think some of the beauty of creating, for me, while I certainly hope to make a certain amount on every piece, I think having it be affordable is part of my mission as an artist
Mm,
to offer something
mm,
that, I mean, when we're talking a piece of this nature, how many people in the world could actually afford that without, you know, when it's a drop in the bucket of the millions and billions of dollars that they may have available to spend on art.
mm,
But to me, it's always exciting when, one of the smaller pieces I have sells to somebody who's never bought an original before. There's something to be said for having a variety of price points and access so more people can enjoy it.
mm,
Many of the artists that many of my art friends, I don't think they set out to create with a value in mind. The value sort of happens along the way.
mm,
Um, I think a lot of artists are just doing what they love and their passion, and quite often you'll see artists work and you'll think it's undervalued, and maybe that's just because it didn't land in the right place on the internet or in the right gallery.
mm.
And then you get other pieces like the banana, you think, wow, that got 6 million. So it's I think it's the only way to create art is to do it from your soul and to not think about it commercially, because then you lose your authenticity, and it gets really difficult to create if you have value and commercial
100%. 100%.
um,
Yeah.
that commercial mindset. It doesn't work. And you ask any artist, the minute they say, oh, how should I be making art so that I can make more money, the minute you think that way, your creativity goes out the window, and you actually
Yeah.
don't
It's
create
horrible.
anything
It's
worthwhile.
not art anymore. You're just a factory.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a relationship between you and the way you create, and the commercial value. It's really difficult to even go there. You kind of have to just let it go, and it will be what it will be. And some people get lucky with $6 million, but I don't think many artists set out to do that. We're just happy to cover our costs, and just knowing that our art's out there on somebody's wall and in someone's home, and maybe occasionally spoken about, is
Yeah.
such
Yeah.
joy.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
it is the 1% of the 1% artists who are making those millions, and most of them are dead.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, whatever the market will bear, I
Yes.
suppose.
so
So
what can we
you,
learn from situations like this, Jennifer?
I think it goes back to what you guys were talking about before. And that is, why do you create? And when I think about that, it's because I can't not create.
Yeah.
There's something
Mm,
inside me that just drives me to see what's going to happen if I put this paint on the canvas. And, some of my pieces are done in a way that I don't know what's going to happen. I'll create an
mm,
abstracted background and go, who's going to come to life from this?
mm,
And
mm.
then some are planned out, and I'll be at the dog park, and my dog will do something funny or somebody, and I'll go, well, now wouldn't that be a fun painting? And I make a note, tell on my phone, make this note, remember this moment of this dog doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then to go back and revisit my notes even years later and go, yeah, okay, it's time for that one. So it's been amazing to me how much of creating has been a real part of my life, and I don't know how that comes together and how that begins. But the interesting thing I found is that even when pieces don't sell, as you said, Natasha, that the audience isn't right or whatever, that at some point, most pieces, it might be an older piece and somebody will say, oh, that's my piece. And it
Mm,
happens later. It doesn't happen during the art show where it's first featured.
yeah.
And then when you listen to the stories about how it impacts them, it's so humbling.
Mm,
It's
Yeah.
so
mm,
humbling. Um,
And I don't think anyone sets out to create art for that reason, but that's the beautiful byproduct that happens later, that keeps you going. And I guess when it is tough and you're not creating the work that you had in your own mind, with the expectations you had, and you can be really hard on yourself. um, I think that when somebody gets a piece and they love it so much, it reminds you that to be kinder to yourself and know that it's appreciated, even if you didn't reach the challenge that you set yourself, or something like that. It's a beautiful part of the art that I don't think a lot of people expect initially.
Yes. Yes. Will this situation change anything about the way that you create art?
Nah.
No, not really, but because of what I make, so people wear what I make or they use. There are some things I make that are not necessarily functional, small sculpture type things that allude to a functional object like a spoon, particularly. And I want it to elicit or provoke thought and consideration, and conversations. I guess there's a ambitious thing that kind of is we're not really talking about. I'm wondering if Maurizio is ambitious and his gallerist is ambitious and they know their market and I mean, this is the kind of art Maurizio makes. It's conceptual art alluding to existing objects, either replicating them like the toilet or actually using them like the banana and the duct tape. And this is what he does. This is what he does. And that's authentic to him. If I did that, like, I'll just take your example earlier, Jennifer. If I took an apple and put a nail in it, I mean, who cares? But I'm not with the gallery that he's with. And there is this momentum and promotion and platform and perhaps performative aspect to the whole game, if you will. And that's what they are opted into, because that's the only way this kind of art can get attention, is through these very public platforms that are covered by the press. And so, the power of the press. I mean, quite frankly, if it weren't for the internet and people writing it about it and blah, 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 we wouldn't even know about it. For all we know, somebody did it 20 years ago and they're like, oh, I just wish I was with that gallery. I mean, it just, who knows?
Okay, I'm going to throw out another question because I have a really strong opinion on this one. And that is, in some cases, it feels like even artists sometimes say, well, the art isn't pure, if you're making money on it, that there's
Mm,
something really powerful, and artists should be starving artists because it should be about the
no.
piece and it should be about that kind of stuff. And so yeah, so what do you think about that?
I don't think there's a problem that there's a transaction that happens for people to acquire. I think in society for thousands of years we've been exchanging and bartering and swapping for things that we like. And I mean, art is something you possess and that you own. So I think even if there wasn't even if you weren't selling it before I was selling art, people would say, "Oh, I like that," and I'm like, "Oh, well, you can have it because you walked my dog last week." Or I don't think that that's an unhealthy way to look at it. It's a possession. It's something you own, and it's something that somebody else might like to own. Before we had factories and plastic, we used to make everything ourselves by
Mm,
hand. So I think it's in us to make and exchange things. Um,
mm, mm,
we've just become
mm,
a little more removed from. I mean, food was a creation, farming and getting all that right. So
mm.
I don't see a problem with the exchange of money. I know that these days it can feel less authentic if you're getting more than what you like $6 million and it's not considered to be worth that. That can feel a little awkward or not authentic, but we've been exchanging money for art for a long time.
Well, it used to be before the kind of individual artists that, people like the Medici's would hire in Italy, their artists, and they would make art, and they were supported. They were basically given a salary, and they just had to do what they needed to do. But the studio artist, solo artist, is kind of a late 18th, 19th, 20th century phenomenon, and it is really hard to make a living as an artist. And there's some very good artists who absolutely choose not to because they can't. Either their art's really challenging, or they're not really good about promoting it, or they can't find the gallery, or they don't know how to, blah 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 blah. So that if you accept that everybody's an artist, the majority of artists do not wish to, nor do they want to make a living from their art, because perhaps for them the whole money exchange cheapens it. They'd rather make it and give it, or just do it for themselves as kind of a therapy. I know a lot of people use art to relax, and it's a therapy. And both are valid. I mean, I think both are valid. What I will not do is jump on a bandwagon and start making something that I think is going to be da 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 da, or take an approach towards what I make just to make money, which probably means mass production, and that's not what my work's about. So I'm not willing to compromise I think as an artist, you have to be really, really clear about why you are making art. You can't be wishy-washy about it, because it's all valid. Even bad art's valid, I mean, bad by whose standard? I mean, what are we talking about here? So like I said, everybody is an artist, and that's kind of a really hard thing to embrace, but I tell this to all my students. I'm like, you're all creative.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that commercial transaction can get in the way of somebody creating, because if they start creating and then they try to go commercial and it doesn't take off, then they see that as the validation when it really shouldn't be, because you should always create first for the joy of the process.
Or you have something to say. I mean, a lot of artists aren't good verbally.
And so it's unfortunate when that commercial transaction gets in the way of somebody feeling whether or not it is worthwhile. When I'm teaching, I'm overwhelmed, and I was there too, how much anxiety people will have when they're first creating based on what they've produced and whether it's worthy, and it's not enough that they enjoyed creating it, and that it was fun, and I guess that's a result of our society today, where everything has a value on it instantly, whether you were planning to sell or not. Is this going to be liked by everyone else? Like, who cares? You had fun. It's part of why I paint outdoors, because if I go outside and paint, if I come home with a really bad painting, I had a really great day. It doesn't really matter. It was a beautiful day outside, and I had fun, and
well, maybe you experimented and did something different, and maybe the color combinations didn't come together the way you wanted, or whatever.
It's a journey, so you have to make 100 bad paintings before you're going to make a good one.
Exactly.
Why do we think that painting number one is going to be great? And this is the thing, you if people decide that they're going to go to and start a gym, they won't expect to have big muscles after their first gym workout, but it's amazing how they'll sit down and paint and they'll expect a masterpiece the first time, and you're like, don't be so hard on yourself. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's like anything. I mean, people, and I think particularly young people today, look at me being all old, immediate gratification. We live in a society, at least in Western culture, where the world is in your pocket, in your purse, and that immediacy is false. I mean, when I teach and I'm doing something as simply as sawing a piece of metal, and I'm just how many times have I done that? And then they go to it and they break 10 blades before they even cut out their rectangle or whatever, and they're just like, they're ready to throw in the towel, and I'm like, dude, relax. You got to break a lot of eggs to make an omelet, I mean, you got to walk before you run, yada, yada. How many more cliches? I mean, I wasn't born this way with a jeweler saw in my hand. I mean, there are absolutely people who take to these things like fish to water. But God, the amount of cliches in this conversation, what can you do? Um, it's the banana in the room. Yeah, it's kind of upsetting that, and it's a challenge as an educator to reassure people. It's like, you've never done this before. You know, your body's never done this before. You never held this tool. You never had to think about all these things. And I try really hard to coach people so they can at least understand what they're trying to achieve. And by the end of the semester, because I'll have 16 weeks, my students almost don't need me. They are amazing. I mean, this particular group I just had, and if any of you, I don't think any of you were here, but oh my gosh, if they see this, they were just phenomenal. Some of them were have a creative background, but most of them didn't. And I was just blown away by what they did. So yeah.
And they
And I
probably
think
taught you some things you didn't know before.
absolutely. Why do we teach? Because I learned something. And then I'm also reminded about the 30 years of experience that I have that have brought me to this point of, you know, my career in the last few years has just been phenomenal. And I am making more money than I ever have before from my art. And it's enabled me to use those beautiful materials that as a metalsmith, I want, like gold, even though it's crazy expensive, and just to take chances. And I just feel emboldened and inspired by my clients. I'm very fortunate. I have some amazing patrons who support me. And by their enthusiasm, I get excited and I make better and better work. So we need, we're doing what we're all doing, making a quote unquote living from our art, or rely on it to a certain extent for an income. We need that momentum, and it's like you're basically walking outside naked every day when you are showing your art. You're showing everything, and it's very vulnerable. And I mean, I'm hardened, so because it's been 30 years, so I can take it. I can take all the comments and blah 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 blah. It doesn't bother me. I don't care anymore. But I also take the compliments that are accolades, like, oh, you know, first prize for this, and oh, your work's beautiful, blah 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 blah. And I say thank you, and I'm gracious. But how do I feel, and what you got to stay grounded. You can't get all. So maybe Maurizio is never going to produce another artwork now. I know he didn't get that 6.2 million. I mean, it was through an auction, so I don't think he gets any of it. I don't know.
He doesn't,
Yeah,
because the person who bought it
that
for
sucks.
120,000 in the beginning sold it. So whoever bought it for 120 now gets the 6.2. So it'll be
Well,
interesting because
part of
those
it.
other
Sotheby's
two,
takes a big chunk.
yeah.
Maybe that's why he didn't join us today, Jennifer.
I know.
I know. Well, if Justinson and Maurizio, see this at any point and want to converse with us, we'll definitely add their comments in when we post the video for sure. So, one thing I just wanted to mention real quick, we've got about 5 minutes left, is that what you guys are talking about is feeling like you're a rookie again, feeling like you're brand new at something. And my impression that is, as I get older, I'm doing things that I've done for 30 years or 20 years or whatever. And there's very few things that make me feel stupid or incompetent,
Mm,
and so when we try and learn something new that helps us grow in different ways, we're back to feeling that incompetence and that
mm.
level. And I think that discourages some people from doing it. And I'm going to say and encourage you that are out there listening or watching or here with us today, do it. Do it. I mean, it's made such a world of difference in my life. And I do believe everybody's creative. So, we have a new year coming up, and if you feel like there's a creative spark for you, I know Kim teaches local classes. So she teaches
Well,
at
and I teach at the university too. Yeah.
Yeah, but Natasha also teaches local to her in Australia, but she also
Mm.
has an online course that's
Ah,
available. So I would encourage you to look at your favorite artists. Maybe if you're going to be in town sometime in the Denver, Aurora area, look up Kim's studio. I'm sure she'd be happy to spend some time showing you, the work that she has in the studio. And same with Natasha. So go to their websites. We'll have their links for you. So you can go ahead and do that. I'm not teaching at the current time, but many of the Artburst artists do. So first of all, we're going to close out here. And I just want to thank Natasha and Kim for joining us. I had a lot of fun with this, and it's so fascinating. Sometimes, as an artist, you're working in your studio by yourself, and it can be a
mm,
very solitary thing. And so to be able to pull together artists that I admire and to hear them talk and how much we really have in common is really kind of fun. It continues to feed me. But also, in all sincerity, congratulations to the artist, Maurizio Cattelan, and the buyers, the gallery, and including Justin Sun, too. Well, I wouldn't send 6.2. I thought, well, I'll create a piece of art, but my bananas are, so instead this will go in my
I
oatmeal.
got mine hanging on the tree.
Yeah, maybe in some banana bread. Um, so the comedian is not a piece that I would ever even consider purchasing, nor could I afford to purchase it. But what it does is it brings the conversation to the forefront, and the artist accomplished exactly what he was trying to do, and that was to create a conversation. And here we are, how many miles away, even years away from when he originally created it, talking about the impact that has on us. So while you aren't likely to find a $6 million piece on artburststudios.com in any of our upcoming shows, you won't find them in most galleries. You won't find them in most art festivals or even your local guild shows. I believe that you're going to still find incredible artists that have artwork that will
Mm,
speak to you and that will be in the price range that you can afford so that you can continue to enjoy it in your house. So, one of the reasons Artburst was created was to introduce you to many amazing artists and their beautiful and thought-provoking work. So, we hope you'll join us for future Artburst shows. We have one coming up in February. And if you want to know what's happening on Artburst, subscribe on artburststudios.com and you can stay in the loop on that. Subscribe on Kim's website and on Natasha's website to follow their journey as they move forward. Thank you for joining us today. It was an important and fun conversation at the same time. So happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2025.